Hello and welcome to episode 102 of PubShorts titled The Wizard. My name is Dr. KK and I'm the Innovation Officer at Trinka and Inago. And I have with me Tony, who will explain why we are calling this episode The Wizard.
Hi, KK. Hi, everyone. Welcome to the latest Pub Shorts. Yes, we this episode is, as always, linked to a song. This particular episode is called "The Wizard," which, if you don't know, is a song by Black Sabbath. And we're using the analogy of wizards to talk about how AI chatbots are acting like clever assistants without us being able to understand how they do it. The magic of AI.
Mhm.
We also cover the bias that AI can be seen to be introducing, ethics for AI-generated medical data, agentic tools, and how people actually use these systems.
Excellent, Tony. So let's get on with the first article. This is a Nature Worldview article titled AI Chatbots Are Already Biasing Research. As you mentioned in your introduction, we must establish guidelines for their use now. So everybody is aware that AI has changed the way the world works, but it's also affecting how researchers do their work. So the academic community, Tony, is concerned about AI-induced biases in literature citations. So AI tools
Yeah,
are accused of exacerbating citation biases, favoring highly cited works. But that's a feature of the system itself, because that's how it is engineered. And AI systems might overrepresent or underrepresent scientists based on cultural biases. So that's something new, and there are calls for guidelines in AI use to address biases in scientific research, and the role of AI in reshaping access and discovery in scientific literature is largely unexamined. So we have to talk about all of this apart from the fact that AI might introduce citation related bias. So what are your thoughts on it, and especially in mind of what we call the responsible AI movement campaign?
now I think we've spoken about this in a number of different episodes before. I mean, there have to be some kind of guardrails. There has to be some kind of structure and control, if only to provide confidence in what these tools are delivering. And I don't think having guidelines is necessarily a bad thing.
Mm-hmm.
I think there are guidelines in other areas of research. Why should this be any different? I think it would be a positive step and create greater confidence, I
Mm-hmm.
think, in these tools if more guidelines were being introduced.
Right. And have you changed your search habits in using general purpose search engines? Are you more and more relying on the generative AI overviews these days already, Tony?
Um, well, if I am, I'm doing it unconsciously. I mean,
Mm-hmm.
what I am doing is certainly you being more natural in the language I use
Mm-hmm.
when I'm going into Gemini or something. Um, so I'm asking it a sort of question the same way, asking the bot a question the same way I would ask a person a question.
Right.
And often getting back, 95% of the time, getting back a reasonable answer. So I suppose in that sense, I've changed some of my behaviors.
Right.
I'm not relying on it completely, but it certainly is modifying how I engage with search engines.
Yeah, in the context of academic researchers, the biases that this article expands on or details are very important from a point of view of citation. So, if at all you are using, if you're a researcher and if you're using AI chatbots for any sort of work, make sure that you uh, validate the content and confirm that the content is indeed what you want it to be, and that especially is applicable to citations, because you do not want hallucinated citations or
Absolutely.
incorrect citations in your manuscript. And you can use some of our tools that Inago offers, including the reference quality checker, if you are interested in knowing whether your citation is high quality and is not maybe of a retracted paper.
Yeah.
All
Yeah.
right. So moving on to the next article, another one from Nature. It is titled AI Generated Medical Data, or data, as my friends from from New Zealand and UK say, can sidestep usual
No, they
ethics.
don't. They don't. If they do, they're wrong.
Can sidestep usual ethics review, universities say. So the basic, so this was something that I honestly I was not consciously aware of. AI generated medical data is being used, Tony, by some institutions in Canada, the US, and Italy without any ethical board approval. So what
Hmm.
what are we talking about? AI generated data. So in clinical medicine especially, we have a problem in terms of whether the data that is used for research, reveals who the identity of the patient is, and some sensitive information. So synthetic data is data that is created by artificial intelligence models based on actual data, to represent the statistical trends in the actual data. And these data obviously do not have the sensitive information in them. And when you use research, when you conduct research with such data, you do not need ethical board approval. So just to put things in perspective, this is what we are talking about. So the reason why you do not need ethical board access as per the institutions is that synthetic data do not contain real or traceable patient information, and therefore sidestep usual ethical reviews. And this such data, obviously, as I explained to you, is created using artificial intelligence models using actual patient data. And this approach can protect patient privacy and allow easier data sharing. So there are justifications from the institutions, and for example, Washington University began waiving ethical reviews in 2020 for such synthetic data related research, and
Mm.
other universities are following suit. So my first of all, I was not aware of it. So I guess maybe Tony, you are also not aware. You were also not aware
No,
of it.
not worry. No.
Yeah. So my question is it still ethically, as in, if should this also be not under, or should this also be under the ethical board purview in terms of what they should check, even if it is in synthetic data? What are your thoughts on it?
I'm not sure if it's covered under the ethical purview, but I'm not. Listen. I'm not a researcher. I've never used synthetic data
Mm-hmm.
uh, at all. So, um, in a sense, I'd see this as a kind of an extension of the theoretical research that may take place. You know, you want to test your principles. You want to test your ideas theoretically before moving to a human to actual human patient data. So I don't see any, as long as the data is representative and it's accurate
Mm-hmm.
and it reflects, the patient condition. I don't see from a theoretical perspective or even from an experimental perspective why it shouldn't be used to just to test the original ideas. But I don't know, but I don't think it should be the sole basis for testing out these theories.
Right.
So no, I don't have any concerns. To answer your question, I don't have any concerns on the ethical side, particularly. But um, if it were the only measure used, then yes, I think I would be concerned. What about you?
In the sense, I think that this is based on actual data. So from that point of view, there is an element of ethics associated with it, no matter how far down from the original data set that we are. The second thing is I'm concerned about the actual validity of the research. Now, again, I'm a layman when it comes to synthetic data. I'm sure that there have been checks put in place to ensure that even if it is synthetic data, it actually represents the actual data set. So I'm concerned about that, and I'm looking forward to sort of unfolding further in terms of what other universities think. And I would believe that I still would want this to be under the ethical board purview, because originally synthetic data was created using patient data.
Yeah,
Right.
I suppose so. But if there's no link to and the whole point about the ethical concerns is, is there any way of linking it back to an individual?
Yeah.
If there is no way of linking it back to an individual, and the data providers can be certain of that,
Mm.
then I think maybe there's still concern, maybe not quite the same degree of concern ethically.
Right. Moving on to the next story, which is from Ethan Mollick's One Useful Thing. Sorry, I should. Yeah. So this is the story on the basis of which we have titled the episode itself. So it's titled "On Working with Wizards," and Ethan explains the concept of working with AI as working with wizards, and the transition from co-intelligence to trusting autonomous AI system is what we are going through. And in general, Ethan wonders about the accuracy and transparency of AI outputs, and notes the importance of learning how to evaluate AI generated results. As in, this is what our core sort of hypothesis would be in responsible AI movement as well. And eventually, finally suggests developing literacy in utilizing AI effectively for different tasks. So there is a lot more into this than this, but in general, Ethan's proposition is that AI will be so difficult to understand how things are done. So it's sort of not I would not say pointless, but it's related to that. It's probably futile to sort of understand how it arrived at the conclusion, and there are examples that Ethan cites. But at the same time, as a human being, your role is to check the validity and the accuracy of it. And Ethan has some actual case studies that he has done using Excel spreadsheets and everything, which are all detailed here, even his own PhD research. And he is surprised that AI was able to identify flaws. The best AI systems, Tony, was able to identify flaws that even a human reviewer has not been able to identify from his point. He
Mm,
himself was not
mm.
aware of it. So there's a discrepancy in these numbers that he was not aware of it until he did this experiment. So there are some other examples of it, including Excel-based things, and nobody knows how it is done, but it's very high quality, and all you need is to sort of validate the accuracy. So your thoughts on this in the context of AI, responsible AI?
Well, first of all, I think Ethan Mollick is one of the not necessarily visionary, but he kind of is one of the leading thinkers in this space at the moment. You know,
Right.
he's one of the 3 or 4 people who whenever I see a blog or a piece by him, I make every effort to read because everything he writes is to the point, and it's not cynical at all. It's constructive. It's critical but in a constructive way. So I
Mm.
think he's a great person to follow. Um, Now, I don't really have anything to say about this. I think, clearly these AI tools are getting better and better.
Mm-hmm.
And, I drive a car, but I don't necessarily understand every way the car works as long as it works.
Nice.
I think, I have a kind of same feeling about this. As long as there's somebody somewhere who's actually verifying, there's a guardrail that's verifying that
Mm-hmm.
what the AI is generating is accurate and correct and appropriate, then that's probably okay by me,
Yeah.
if I'm honest.
Yeah. So, would you believe that this is an actual slide deck created by Claude within a few minutes, if I'm not mistaken, having been provided the data set? And as per Ethan, it's very high in quality. I mean, it's obviously not presentable, but he would have taken maybe hours to get here. And with a
Oh, yeah,
few minutes of
days.
edit, edits to do this, it is already at that high level.
Yeah.
I do not know if you're following the Google Notebook LM features these days. You can make an AI overview. We were able to create a podcast level overview of anything that you wanted to sort of study with Google Notebook LM. Now there's a video overview as well, which is quite remarkably good. And I just experimented
You
it.
don't need me.
Yeah. No, it is not that. It's basically, it is, if you give it, let's say, this article, it would create a video with sort of slide deck with the voiceover explaining
Yeah.
what this article is and what are the key numbers, etc. Yeah, yeah,
Incredible.
yeah.
Incredible.
All right. Ethan also linked everybody to Helen King's list. This is a list maintained by Helen King. I guess you are also aware of. She's also a leader in terms of AI.
I know Helen.
Yeah, yeah. So this is AI powered publishing use cases. So Ithaca SNR, if you remember, Tony has a huge list of generative AI applications, but this is structured according to different areas like this: author support, book translation, citation analysis, for example. There are things in here, but I do not find our own product listed here. Maybe we should work on that. But all sorts of things are being sort of maintained. This is, I think, it's a super list, is what I think Ethan calls it. A lot of things there. So something that I think everybody should keep an eye on, and also maybe even contribute in terms of maintaining
I
accuracy.
think contribute. There are not just ours, but a number of gaps.
Yeah,
It's great to see this sort of list
yeah.
available, but it's not complete.
Right, right. All right, moving on to the next story, which is ChatGPT research. This is the first research that I think I remember that I'm reading in this context. So, OpenAI released a study on how people are using ChatGPT, the entirety of the world. It's a National Bureau of Economic Research (NBER) working paper. So, it's a collaboration between OpenAI and this bureau by OpenAI's economics research team and the Harvard economics David Deming. So the study highlights the shrinking demographic gaps and economic value creation because of the AI ChatGPT use, and ChatGPT adoption apparently is growing faster in low and middle income countries, which is relatively surprising, even though paid users are likely to be more in developed economies. The usage, Tony, is split between personal and work related activities, and writing is the most common work task done by ChatGPT, according to the study. The study involved analyzing 1.5 million conversations without compromising user privacy. And the usage patterns are categorized into asking, doing, and expressing. Asking covers advice and guidance, doing involves task completion, and expressing involves personal reflection and play. So, overall, your thoughts on it? Are you surprised at these numbers, or is there any sort of trend that sort of sticks out in terms of what you would not have expected to see?
I'm not particularly surprised by these numbers. So I
Mm,
think what these numbers don't necessarily reflect, though, is the fact that we have experience from our own business of how authors have used ChatGPT or a similar LM to help generate an article.
mm-hmm,
Yet the article still has errors,
mm-hmm,
still has work that somebody needs to go in and fix. So what we're seeing, there are certain markets that we engage with that have started using LLMs, but then have them come back to using services like ours in order to ensure that the level of accuracy and the level of correctness within an article is achieved. I mean, it's good, but it's not for everyone. It's not always good enough.
right, right. Which is in line with what we are the core principles of responsible AI as well, which is what we have been talking about in this episode as well. So,
Yeah.
in your conversations with publishers, have you heard anything more in terms of this? The
Uh, Not specifically this. Generally, more about wanting to um, embrace the kind of the recommendations that have been set out by the STM Trade Association around the responsible use of AI, and and movements like our own, the responsible AI movement, where we're encouraging best practice in the use of communicating how a researcher is using AI when generating their content. That is coming more and more. We are seeing increasing changes to things like submission guidelines for authors, with more detail being included rather than just having some kind of generic statement. There's a greater requirement for granularity in terms of which LLMs were used and where. So yeah, no, it's increasingly prevalent.
mm, interesting. Thanks for sharing that. And finally, we have the last main story. This is a very interesting story. The DeepSeek's AI model has become apparently the first peer-reviewed language model. So this is obviously a research paper on how DeepSeek was made and how it was trained and everything.
Mm,
DeepSeek is a large language model, obviously developed by a Chinese startup, and it I think shot to fame in the last I think last December, I think, if and it threatened to usurp ChatGPT or OpenAI from the throne. And this model was created, Tony, for just $300,000, and it wasn't trained on outputs from other LLMs, even though I was under the impression that it was, and it uses a distilled training method, and peer reviewed. Now it has been peer reviewed and setting a precedent for future AI models, and it uses reinforcement learning for training, avoiding human prescribed tactics. And this method has inspired other AI researchers, and other AI models have come into play. So the main key thing is that the behind this, the under the hood details of DeepSeek has been peer reviewed, and there has been a research published. And this is obviously not true with many of the quote unquote open models, because we do not know what training data went to it or how training was
mm,
done. So that's an
mm.
interesting precedent, and China is again sort of leading the trend of transparency or explainability, at least in the context of AI models. So your thoughts on it?
The only that I was surprised that the DeepSeek wasn't trained using other LLMs. That I found incredible. I mean, as you say, this really the set a
Yeah.
if it's accurate, if it's correct, it's going to create surely some fantastic new LLMs moving forward in terms of using a different approach that
Right.
doesn't necessarily replicate the mistakes of existing LLMs.
Right. So I'm expecting more LLMs or more, let's say, vendors to start doing this in terms of letting researchers understand how their model works, because that'll
Cake,
also
have you seen any it's a comparative analysis between the accuracy of these reports? I'm not. I'd be interested to see that.
there are obviously, but those are very sort of technical stuff, and I have seen some our own developers of sharing some of this information in terms of
Yeah,
how different models stack up in terms of, let's say, reasoning capabilities or any academic research capabilities and everything. So
yeah.
that's there obviously, but beyond, I mean, you cannot. It's not a simple answer. It's basically that if you want a simple answer, the better, faster, sorry, the better, larger model, the newer models generally give better results. That's the sort of simple answer to all of this, regardless of
Hmm.
the AI. And there are obviously nuances or characteristics of each model and each brand that needs to be factored in while you're deploying it
Yeah.
for any use case.
I mean, this is the staggering thing. It's changing on. I think we've commented again on this before. It's changing on an almost daily basis.
Yeah.
Maybe not daily, but it's often difficult to keep track
Yep.
of what the best LLM is at any one given point in time.
Yep. All right, moving on to quick hits, which have a sprinkling of peer review related content because you just passed the peer review week. The first one is a scholarly kitchen article. Ask the chef's article, what is a bold experiment with AI and peer review that you'd like to see tested? So the format is that there are four of chefs from the scholarly kitchen who provide answers. So I'll just summarize the answers. Tim Vines suggests an experiment where large language models could independently establish a peer review process for a journal. This would involve the LLM managing submissions, selecting reviewers, and providing editorial decisions, potentially transforming the peer review landscape. Now, obviously, you would probably have a lot of questions about this, but these are just overviews of the arguments. Hasib Irfanullah, who had for the last couple of years has argued that there is the human peer review system has its own problems, and therefore we need an AI sort of assisted system. Highlights the current weaknesses, obviously as I explained, and he presents hypotheses questioning the necessity of traditional peer review in the AI era, and suggests that AI could make the system more just, which is less biased and more accurate and everything. So that's an interesting perspective. And somebody who you respect, Tony Hong Zhu,
Yeah.
proposes a structured comparison between current peer review processes and AI-driven models. So it's a comparison. So let's see how the human-based systems stack up against AI-assisted systems. And the goal is to explore how much of peer review can be automated while maintaining human oversight to ensure rigor and trust. And finally, Alice Meadows on AI guidelines calls for industry-wide guidelines regarding AI's role in peer review, and she stresses the importance of transparency and consistency in AI use across the publishing processes.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
what are your thoughts? There are closing thoughts from the editor. I think Mariam is the sort of moderator for the discussion. So, your thoughts on it? Are you particularly swayed by any of these four?
Um, each of those four have, in a sense, they all kind of talk about the same thing in terms of what can we do to increase trust in AI peer review. I think the reality of the situation is, I think within a couple of years, if it's not already happening, there will be more and more AI within the peer review workflow. It may not be the only review that takes place, but it will be there. Publishers, research organizations, funders are finding it increasingly difficult to identify and get reviewers to do the work that's required.
Right.
So having some kind of AI-based review is better than nothing to start with, but it still requires some kind of human validation. But no, I think each of these experiments or theories, ideas, has merit, particularly Hongzhou. So I like his thing about
even in terms of practical sort of adaptation, I think Hongzhou's is the best one. In fact, the next one, the next story, the quick hit that we cover, is related to the first one suggested by Tim Vine. So let's just go to that. So this is another guest post written by, co-authored by Ashutosh Gildial and Gareth Dyke. Is it enough to say journal is peer reviewed? The case for rating journals based on peer review quality. So in my first reading, I did not understand this, but in a nutshell, the article calls for analysis of the current a journal's current peer review setup, and then establishing sort of criteria to judge whether it is doing the journal is doing the job properly. So basically, the entire peer review itself by a journal is assessed and sort of scored, and depending on that, we can do decisions. So it is an interesting paper. Interesting article, and I think I guess you've already read it, and I think it's a good way to look at there's no one sort of solution for any sort of all the journals or all the publishers. Depending on what they face as challenges, you need customized solutions in terms of balancing and mixing the AI assistants and AI only and stuff like that. So your thoughts on this, Tony?
Well, again, this is a kind of an extension of an existing thing. There is no one style of peer review. There's no one method of peer review. Some journals will have a more rigorous peer review process than others. There's no question. Some may adopt a single reviewer system, a double reviewer system. Some may have open peer review, collaborative peer review, blind, and anonymous peer review. I think this is simply an extension of that, in a sense, in that there needs to be a way of determining what kind of the baseline should be, but publishers also, they need to think about what value they can add. Right. So thinking about how else they can engage with their communities to increase and to reinforce their perceived value in peer review. So no, I think this is it makes complete sense, but it's an extension of what's already happening.
Right. And a quick news in terms of how AI is catching up with researchers and research itself. Gemini AI solves coding problems that stumped 139 human teams at ICPC World Final. So, in a nutshell, Gemini was able to perform better than mathematicians, as far as I understand. Only four human teams matched the performance, as in were comparable, and Google connected Gemini to a remote environment for the competition. So, a complex optimization problem was solved only by Gemini. And so, I mean, I'm not surprised, but at the same time, this sort of a news is not being highlighted as much as, all the other things that we are talking about. AI is also very potent in terms of assisting the research process itself, and we'll cover related stories. But your thoughts on it? Are you surprised?
Uh, no, I'm not surprised at all. And in fact, if I put my historical hat on, I remember the first time there was a story in the press about how a supercomputer beat a chess grandmaster
Mm-hmm.
in a game. It's
Mm-hmm.
you expect this to be the case. You expect as these AI tools become more powerful,
Right.
that they will start to, if not, if they're not already, um, um, go beyond what the human teams are capable of, if only in terms of speed and short-term accuracy.
Right. And finally, we have a quick hit thanks to Dave Flanagan, who joined me on a podcast for the peer review week in terms of discussing how AI can assist in the peer review process. You can find more about it on the YouTube channel, Inago YouTube channel, if you wanted to, or also on LinkedIn. But quickly, he pointed out or rather forwarded this link or shared this link on LinkedIn from Simon Wilson's weblog. Basically, it's a definition of the AI agent, which is actually misused apparently. I mean, even I think that I've been using the agent wrong in the sense as to how he's defining it. So basically, the new definition of an LLM agent, Tony, is something as an AI agent that runs tools in a loop to achieve a goal. So it's a goal directed one. It may or may not take decisions, and that the human decision point was what I was ascribing to an AI agent, equating it to a human making a decision. But it's basically an agent that runs tools before a goal. It may not need to make decisions. This is all I'm thinking of. Any thoughts on this?
Um, I think I agree. I mean, you're not asking these agentic tools to make a decision. You're asking them to perform a task,
Mm-hmm.
and ultimately, one of those tasks might be, provide a judgment on this. But you don't necessarily need to include that question. But you do need to actually run those tasks.
Right.
So yeah, I think it makes sense.
Right. So that brings us to the end of this episode 102. Tony, I need to run an errand, so I would like you to quickly explain to our listeners where they can find the previous episodes of the podcast. And
Of course,
yeah,
yes.
please.
So the next episode. Thank you. So if you're interested in seeing any previous episodes of PubShorts, you can go to our YouTube channel. Just search for Inago PubShorts, and you'll see all previous 101 episodes. I can't believe it's 101 already. Make sure you press the like button. Make sure you share with your colleagues, and also, send us ideas if you've got any comments or suggestions for future topics. We'd love to hear from you. But do go over to the YouTube channel
Thank you.
and search PubShorts.
Thank you. Thank you. I'm getting a call from somebody, and I think I need to attend it. So until the next time, this is an abrupt ending, but apologies for that. Until the next time, this is Dr. KK signing off. We'll see you in the
Bye.
next one. Bye, Tony.